We've got an important session this week. It's one that a number of people struggle with, food addiction. Scott's going to be taking the reins on that. But before he gets started, maybe someone has something they'd like to share or they'd like to discuss. And if there's any new people, we'd love to hear how you found out about the classes and what you might expect to get from them. Yeah, Kyra.
I started coming to classes in October. I got a flyer from my doctor and I didn't make any changes. I was just getting used to it, but knew that I was going to pull the trigger in January. Told her she had just put me on cholesterol medicine. No matter what I did, it wouldn't come down. I was eating healthy, or I had a good idea it was healthy. I was much better. But I mean, I was eating a lot of fruits, veg, oatmeal for breakfast, but there was a lot of olive oil involved and weekends havoc. So on January 1st, I was off the medication for my cholesterol. My blood pressure was coming up and she didn't like that. But I said, give me 6 weeks. And she said, okay. I said, we're going to come off everything and just do it. I have now got my blood test and I dropped my cholesterol, the LDL, the bad one, 60 points.
Wow.
My blood pressure is normal and I have lost 16 pounds in, this is week 10. So it has been amazing. My energy, I have no joint pain. It has just been great. I took your advice. Charlie, you mentioned that when you started it, you didn't go out to eat for the first 6 weeks. So I literally for 10 weeks, other than get 1 cup of coffee, have only eaten food I've made at home. So this weekend will be the first time I'll be up in Eugene and scoped out some healthy places for somebody's birthday. So that's a little nerve wracking, but other than that, it's been great. And this whole program has been so supportive and so informative that people still can't believe it's not a big deal for me to eat how I'm eating. It's just not. It tastes good. The food is great. It's not hard to make, just 1 day of prep. And I'm seeing weight loss and health benefits that I hope for. So I just thank you all. This has been great.
Wow, amazing.
So Kyra, that is, you know, your testimonial there is the reason that Scott and I do these classes. You know how to put a smile on our face. And we're so thrilled for you. And I hope others take notice if they're kind of on the fence about this.
Thank you.
Okay, let's maybe hear from somebody else, perhaps, who's interested in sharing or questioning.
I have to say something, Charlie.
Okay, Trouty.
I have to be off for a little while. I'm only on chicken noodle soup and just something like that, and the Gatorade. I have something, I don't know if it's COVID or something, but when that's going to be gone, I'm going to be right back on it, because right now I need to concentrate on getting well, and the rest of it, I'm sold on the whole food, you know, whole plant diet. Yeah.
Great.
But I think it acts like COVID, but I don't know if it is. You know, I've had too many people telling me, oh, they got COVID, the cousins have COVID. And I had one visit me at my home and she had the sniffles, and I came down 2 days later, sniffles, the throat, you know, and then the deep cough, you know, and a slight temperature too.
Did you get tested?
I have the test here. No, I have it right here.
Okay,
So,
well, take it. I know you kind of don't want to find out maybe, but I
don't
would do
care.
it.
I don't care either way, because I want to be with my friends, but I don't want to expose them to it, you know, so I stay home. But I don't know how to do it. So I don't know. Do you know how to do it?
Yeah, if you need help, you call me on my phone and I will talk you through it over the phone. You have my
Okay.
phone number, don't you?
No, I don't.
Well, get a piece of paper and pencil. It's 541 680
680,
0361.
0361.
And
Okay,
I will talk you through it after class.
okay, sounds good.
Okay, you're very welcome. Who else has anything they'd like to offer?
Hi, it's Velvet.
Hey, Velvet, so good to
Hey.
see you.
Hi, I'm out walking, so if you hear cars, that's why.
Okay,
If Trouty is still on, I was just gonna say there's something called chickpea noodle soup. It's just like chicken noodle soup,
It's
just
what?
without the chicken. It's chickpea noodle soup.
Chickpea noodle?
chickpea,
Chickpea,
chick and a P, P-E-A, chick,
like the
Pea.
beans, garbanzo beans.
Chip?
chick,
Pea.
like a chicken, chick,
Yeah.
P, P-E-A.
Have you ever had garbanzo beans?
Oh, yeah. I don't
They're
like
the
it, but I
same,
eat it.
same thing.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to have the whole thing. I put the garbanzo beans in my stew, but
Yeah.
that's about as far as it'll go usually.
Okay,
Well, it's a good option, just in case ever in the future you want to try something else.
What brand is it?
So it's just garbanzo beans and you make like a chicken noodle soup, just like you would, but instead of chicken, you add garbanzo beans. There's recipes online.
Oh, okay.
thank
Thank
you,
you.
Velvet.
You're welcome.
All right, who else?
May I ask a question?
Donna, go right ahead.
I pulled a recipe. I don't remember where I got it, but it's a vegetarian chili.
Yeah,
And one of the ingredients which I bought and put in it, wanted your opinion on, was a Bob's Red Mill plant protein bits or vegetable protein bits. What do you have to say about that?
I'd say it doesn't sound like it grows on a tree or in the ground. It sounds like some processed food.
Yeah, it
And,
does.
I think you get enough protein. I know that I do if I eat a variety of different foods and eat enough, and I know that you will get enough protein if you do also, and that you don't need to spend extra money on that. If you need to and have to buy it for your peace of mind, I doubt that it would be that harmful for you. It's just probably missing some of the elements that real food has. So, is it better than eating an egg or eating, some other processed food, like, meat or dairy, cheese?
Yes,
Yeah, it's better than that.
It
But-
acted like a, I mean, it was quite a hefty amount. It was 12 ounces. It acted like it bulked it up. It really did bulk up the chili.
Yeah.
So, but I wondered about it.
Scott, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's probably that. I've seen Bob's Red Mill. It's TVP, texturized vegetable protein. So it's just, processed. I think most of it's made out of soy most of the time, but yeah, just a processed food. So, it's
Okay,
unnecessary, don't,
Okay.
like Charlie said, don't waste your money on it. Or
okay.
All right, we need to let Scott go, but we have time for a couple more quick questions, I think. Dave and Cherie. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
I'm working on it. There we go.
I went to Costco and got all these seaweed snacks. And I noticed it doesn't say anything about iodine on the ingredients list. Is that meaningful?
you're gonna want them.
It probably has some iodine. I don't know how much, but it also has oil, most of those products. So be careful about that.
Ah,
Yeah.
where do you get your seaweed?
So I get it from Dulce, or I get it from Nori, or I get it Wakame. Those are the three choices that we kind of look for when we're doing it. It's not that what you have there is a horrible choice. It's just that it has additional oil, which may not be so beneficial for you.
Dulce, Nori, or what was the last thing you said?
Dulce, nori, and wakame, Wakame, wakame.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Joan,
So NPR had a program, an A1 program this week, and it was talking about the psychology of food and how our world is getting more addicted to activities and to foods. And it followed along with this program about, why people are feeling the spikes and with their food choices. So I just thought it was interesting.
well, thanks for sharing that. And that's what we're going to be, or Scott's going to be talking about tonight. One last quick question for Marcia, and then we're going to get on because I'm glad we waited a bit because we were like at 25 and now we're at 45 people in the room, which is good. We're happy. Marcia, what's up?
Has anybody tried soil, CURLS, soy curls?
Yeah, soy curls. So soy curls are, a soy processed form also. And, if you're trying to transition and you have people who like the texture of chicken or meat, then using some soy curls in there is probably a reasonable choice. If you have someone who just doesn't want to stick with foods as grown in nature, it's, a whole lot healthier than any of the animal choices that you'll pick out. Not as healthy as the foods as grown in nature, though.
Yeah, well, I ordered and got some today. I think Chef AJ has a recipe that it calls for. And then I saw it in one of the other cookbooks. The daughter-in-law of who wrote China Study, I think she has a recipe for it.
Yeah, so we had plenty of that when we were transitioning many years ago, and it was actually pretty good. But we've kind of gotten away from it as we've incorporated the real foods. We like the real food taste,
Yeah.
but it's a reasonable choice for you, Marcia, and for your
Okay.
family who's trying to transition.
Yeah, I doubt they even try it. They won't try nothing.
Joan, did you forget to leave your hand down, or is it? Yeah, okay. Scott, thanks for being patient, but we're up to 46 people and he's got important words for you tonight, and thanks for doing this.
All right, you're welcome. Is my volume okay? You guys can hear me okay?
Yep, we can hear you good.
So I want to start off with going over a few of the resources on the website regarding tonight's class on food addiction and behavior change before I start the PowerPoint, just to get so you know where these things are. And this is recorded, so you can go back if you forget how to get to the different resources I go over here tonight. So I want to go click on resources on the homepage of the website. First, go from handouts from classes. And I just wanted to show you what is your why for change is the first handout I wanted to refer to. So click on this. It just is a handout, goes over the importance of finding your why for change. So when we talk about especially behavior change section, knowing your why is going to be really important. So we'll get to that. So I wanted to show you that. And then I wanted to go to the books under resources here. Links to books right here. And I wanted to show you the salt, sugar, fat. So this is one that has a lot to do with tonight with the food addiction, especially the foods substances and processed foods that kind of get us addicted, kind of hit those pleasure centers. So it's a really interesting book. You might want to check that out. And then another one is, let me scroll down. The Craving Mind by Judson Brewer. He's a psychiatrist. That's a really good one. You might want to check that one out. And then another one is The Pleasure Trap. And I'll be talking a little bit about The Pleasure Trap tonight by Doug Lisle. He's a psychologist, and Alan Goldhammer. So that's another book that's related to this class. And then also Good Habits and Bad Habits by Wendy Wood. She's a psychologist as well. And I'll be talking about forming habits tonight. I have some of the quotes and stuff from this book there. And then finally, Food Junkies by Vera Tarman. She's also a psychiatrist and is a food addiction specialist. And so that's a really good book. And I have some material that I'll talk about tonight from that book. And then finally on the website, I wanted to show you, and hopefully if we have time tonight, we go to videos. And if I'll have time for questions at the end. And if we don't have time, if we have time after the questions, I was planning to show a little section of this video, The Willpower Instinct by Kelly McGonigal. She's a health psychologist at Stanford. And I just wanted to show a little section of this video because it's a really good follow-up to behavior change. So when we finish with behavior change, if we have time, I'll show a little bit of this. But if we don't have time and you guys have lots of questions, you guys can just watch this on your own. It's a really good lecture. It's just here on the website. All right, that's all I wanted to show there. Let me do this.
Kelly McGonigal.
Go back to here. Let me pull up my PowerPoint. There we go. All right, so food addiction and behavior change. Start with this. So substance abuse has many forms. So it's kind of a bit of a harsh picture, but it's definitely very true. A lot of us can relate to this. I mean, there's different kinds of drugs and sugar and fat and salt and all of that from the processed foods, and the lower picture is very addicting as well. So kind of needs to be treated in the same manner. So before we get started with food addiction itself, I want to give you a little bit of background about something called the motivational triad. And this is described in the book, the Pleasure Trap book. But I want to go over, this is basic physiology for all species, even a lot of times even insects and all other species of living creatures have this motivational triad. So we all want to seek pleasure, we want to avoid pain, and we want to conserve energy. These are three basic things that are wired into our brain. This goes down to the midbrain, the places in our brain that are not by choice. These are basically just natural instincts. So a good example of this I like to use is if you're walking in a field and you see an apple tree right next to you, and you see there's a fairly ripe apple that's pretty low on the tree, but then you see about maybe another 30-40 yards further down in the field, you see a bunch of really red juicy looking apples that are a little bit higher up in the tree, and they look even sweeter, they look even better. So you would probably get more pleasure from those, but because you want to avoid pain and conserve energy, you're going to pick the low-hanging fruit, so to speak, right? So we'll be more likely to pick the fruit that looks pretty good and it's easy to grab and it's just right close by to us, rather than go walk further, have to climb up a tree, possibly get hurt, falling out of the tree, have some pain involved with climbing it, conserving energy, or expending more energy. And so we make these decisions all the time, every day. And whether you're a human or a paramecium or an insect, they follow these same three triad of motivation. We want to seek pleasure with the least amount of pain and with the least amount of energy expended. So it's that whole thing where if you're in a cave and you're trying to be a hunter-gatherer and you're expending energy, you're going to want to try to find the most calories you can for the least amount of energy expended, because otherwise you would just stay where you are and try to, if someone can bring you something that's you're going to want to have that energy coming to you with the least amount of energy expended. And so the pleasure trap is, so kind of knowing that we want to seek pleasure, avoid pain, and conserve energy, the pleasure part of it could be so extreme, you could fall into something called the pleasure trap. So what the pleasure trap is it's deceiving our instincts. And so a good example of this is if you, they've done studies on rats where you put cocaine in a cage with a rat and you give it a choice. It can push a lever, and with the one lever, food will come down. With another lever, there'll be a entrance into another cage where there's a female rat where they could mate in there. And then there's another lever that will put cocaine down, and the rat can eat the cocaine. And the rat will choose the cocaine every time. It'll choose the cocaine every time because when it gets the cocaine, it floods the brain with dopamine at such a high level that the pleasure part of the motivational trait is so strong that it'll forget about conserving energy. It'll forget about pain. So because the rat will end up starving itself and die because it won't eat food and it won't procreate. It won't mate because it wants the cocaine, because of the huge hit of dopamine it's getting that overloads so much that it makes you avoid the conserving energy and the avoiding pain. So that's an example of what the pleasure trap is. And so drug addiction is a good example of this. So even though we know, so we're addicted to something and we know it's harming our health, or we know it's, we're going to end up having to break the law because we're going to try to get the drug, that we know that that's going to be the consequence, but we're so addicted, the pleasure is so high that we get so addicted that we'll make that choice. So that's what the pleasure trap is. Okay, so I'm going to show you a couple of videos, a couple of Dr. Greger videos about how sugar and fat, the biological aspects of this, and how it can mimic what drugs do in our brain with things that are high in sugar and fat specifically. We're going to watch a couple of quick videos here.
People have chewed coca leaves for at least 8,000 years as a mild stimulant without any evidence of addiction. But when certain components are isolated and concentrated into cocaine, we've got a problem. The same may be true of sugar. People don't tend to binge on bananas. It's perhaps the reason we're more likely to supersize soda than sweet potatoes, why we're less likely to overeat this kind of corn compared to that kind of corn. The overconsumption of sugar-sweetened diets has often been compared to drug addiction, though this parallel was based until very recently more on anecdotal evidence than on solid scientific grounds. But now we have PET scans, imaging technology that can measure brain activity. It all started with this publication showing decreased dopamine sensitivity in obese individuals. And the heavier they were, the less responsive they appeared to become. We see the same thing in cocaine addicts and alcoholics. This would suggest that a reduction in dopamine receptors is associated with addictive behavior, irrespective of whether it's due to food or to addictive drugs as seen in substance abusers. Dopamine is considered the neurotransmitter primarily involved in the pleasure and reward center of our brain, helping to motivate our drive for things like food, water, and sex, all necessary for the perpetuation of our species. It was healthy and adaptive for our primate brains to drive us to eat that banana when there wasn't much food around, but now that fruit is in loop form, this adaptation has become a dangerous liability. The original Coca-Cola formulation actually included coca leaf, but now perhaps its sugar content may be the addictive stand-in.
I'm going to watch one about fat.
Like the tobacco companies and other drug lords, have been able to come up with products that tap into that same dopamine reward system. Why a picture of a cheeseburger rather than sugary soda pop? Well, now we know fat may have similar effects on the brain as well. You feed some people some yogurt packed with butterfat, and within 30 minutes, you can start to see the same changes in brain activity you get when you drink sugar water. People who regularly eat ice cream, sugar and fat, have a deadened dopamine response in their brains to drinking a milkshake. It's like when drug abusers have to use more and more to get the same high. Frequent ice cream consumption is related to a reduction in reward region responsivity in humans. They're talking about the pleasure center in the brain. paralleling the tolerance observed in drug addiction. Once we've so dulled our dopamine response, we may subsequently overeat in an effort to achieve the degree of satisfaction experienced previously, which contributes to unhealthy weight gain. What do fatty, sugary foods have in common? They are energy-dense foods. Maybe less the number of calories than their concentration. Consumption of a calorie-dense diet compared to the same number of calories in a calorie-dilute diet leads to that numbing of the dopamine response. It's like the difference between cocaine and crack. Same stuff chemically, but by smoking crack cocaine, we can deliver the kind of a higher dose quicker to our brain. As an aside, I found it interesting that the control drink in these milkshake studies wasn't just water. They can't use water because our brain can actually taste water on the tongue. I didn't know that. So they had to use artificial saliva. They made people drink a solution designed to mimic the natural taste of saliva. Ew. Anyway, with this new understanding of the neural correlates of food addiction, there have been calls to include obesity as an official mental disorder. After all, both obesity and addiction share the inability to restrain behavior in spite of an awareness of detrimental health consequences. And that's one of the defining criteria of substance abuse. You keep putting crap in your body despite the knowledge that you have a problem that is likely caused by the crap. Yet you can't stop. Redefining obesity as an addiction, as a psychiatric disease, would be a boon to drug companies that are already working on a whole bunch of drugs to muck with our brain chemistry. For example, you give people an opiate blocker, like they do for people with heroin overdoses to block the effects of the drug, and people eat significantly less cheese. And it just doesn't do as much for them anymore when their opiate receptors are blocked. Rather than taking drugs, though, we can prevent the deadening of our pleasure center in the first place by sticking to foods that are naturally calorically dilute, like whole plant foods. This can help bring back our dopamine sensitivity such that we can again derive the same pleasure from the simplest of foods. And this is not just for people who are obese. Yes, when we regularly eat calorie-dense animal and junk foods like ice cream, we can blunt our pleasure center and overeat to compensate. But when our brain downregulates dopamine receptors to deal with all these jolts of fat and sugar, we may experience less enjoyment from other activities as well. That's why cocaine addicts may have an impaired neurological capacity to enjoy sex, why smokers also have an impaired ability to respond to positive stimuli. Since these all involve the same dopamine pathways, what we put into our body, what we eat, can affect how we experience all of life's pleasures. So to live life to the fullest, what's the solution? Well, the food industry, according to some addiction specialists, should be given incentives to develop low-calorie foods that are more attractive, palatable, and affordable so that people can adhere to diet programs for a long time. No need. Mother Nature beat them all to it.
All right, did you guys pick that up about the opiate blocker on cheese? So the reason for that is the main protein in cheese is called casein, and casein gets converted to casomorphin in the brain and has a morphine-like opiate effect, and that has to do with trying to get the calf to stimulate the calf to suckle and bond with the mother and to gain weight really fast for the calf. It puts a little bit of this casomorphin in there to kind of make the cow feel good when there's nursing and to actually crave and want the mother's milk. And so if we take Narcan or naloxone, which you hear about a lot to reverse heroin overdoses and fentanyl and all these kinds of things, you give that drug to people, they don't get as much satisfaction out of eating cheese because that cheese goes to that opiate receptor and it's been blocked by the Narcan. Very interesting, isn't it? All right, so let's continue on. So let's define kind of food addiction versus people that have just food issues. And sometimes these can blend together, but let's go through these. So a normal eater, when overweight, will use willpower to make different food choices to lose weight. So you might, over the holidays or something, maybe indulge in more food than you normally would eat and maybe gain a few pounds. But then, if you don't have any real food issues, you're just, okay, I'll just eat less and exercise more and this and that, and just use a little bit of willpower, and they go back to their baseline weight. So that's a normal eater, somebody that just doesn't really have any issues. And then emotional eaters can be on a little bit of a spectrum, sometimes blending into food addiction. But emotional eaters is more defined as using food as a medication, basically, to self-medicate, so comforting. So, it would be kind of on the spectrum of being fairly normal to if you had a really stressful day, or, a family member just died or something, and you indulge in a little bit of sugary, fatty food just because it makes you feel a little bit better, but you only would do it in a real certain situation, but not very often. We would consider that being an emotional eater, but some of that now and again isn't necessarily, pathologic or a real big problem, because if it's not something you do very frequently, it's not likely going to cause any health problems or anything. But then it can be a spectrum. It can be where, whether it's a good day or a bad day or a stressful day or a day you wanted to celebrate, and we celebrate with these foods that are really high in calorie density, high in sugar, high in salt, high in fat. And we do that for all these different situations, and it's almost on a daily basis, especially, or several times a week. You can consider that an emotional eater, and in that, if it gets really excessive, it could start to delve into the food addiction section. But I just want to acknowledge that there are lots of emotional eaters, and I think, my guess in my experience in life and with patients is, I think most of us have kind of fall on that emotional eating spectrum quite a bit. So it's pretty darn common. And then full on food addiction is all the stuff that Dr. Greger talked about in those videos, as far as it's basically you can't stop, it's causing you health problems, or it's causing lots of problems in your life, but you can't stop eating those foods that are really high, whether you're a salt or a person or a sugar person or a fat person. Most foods have a combination of all of these things. Like if you read that book, Sugar, Salt, and Fat, you'll realize that all these foods have combinations of all three of those highly addictive substances. To salts especially causes cravings, tends to make people want to stimulate to eat more and causes cravings, whereas the sugar and the fat definitely floods the dopamine in the brain. And so having food addiction by definition, and it's starting to gain a lot of support. It used to there used to be debate about whether it really existed, but now there's lots of textbooks and studies and the stuff in the brain and the imaging and all this stuff, that now it is really a real thing. And there's food addiction specialists, like the authors of some of those books I went over, psychiatrists that have clinics, and they're treating patients with food addiction. And kind of the overriding theme of that is the people that are dealing with food addiction need the same type of support offered to anyone with any other kind of substance abuse disorder, whether it's alcohol or heroin or methamphetamines or cocaine, whatever it is. You need the same, so-called like 12-step program. You need to have that support and be treated in the same way. And because in a lot of cases, it's even more difficult to treat, because if someone's an alcoholic, you just keep alcohol out of the home and you don't go to bars, or you stay away from the places you could get drugs and things like that. But we all have to eat, and our food culture and our society is surrounded by foods that are highly addictive. So it can be a really, really challenging thing, but people need the same support. They need to have counseling if that's needed. They need to abstain, especially if they're have a really severe addiction to some of these foods. You're just going to have to completely avoid it. You never tell somebody that is an alcoholic, well, just have a beer on the weekend and you'll be fine. Or someone that's a heroin addict, oh, just shoot up once every week or two, you'll be fine. We wouldn't say that, right? Or even a smoker, just smoke 1 or 2 cigarettes a week and you'll be fine. But we don't say that, because we know people are addicted to these substances, and so it's the exact same thing with food addiction. So we need to give it the same treat it the same with as much seriousness, because think about it, if somebody's trying to follow this diet, whole food plant-based diet, and they have food addiction issues, they, by saying, oh, you've been eating so good, just try this recipe I made for you, and just eat this, and you're at a party or whatever. It's like, no one would do that if you were an alcoholic or a drug addict, but they do it because food is part of our culture, and these highly addictive toxic foods are part of our culture, and it's normalized. Because it's normalized, it just makes it that much more challenging. So some of the things I learned from Vera Tarman's book, first you need to detoxify to learn about your disease. So a lot of times, it takes weeks to months sometimes of being off of the addictive substance before you'll actually kind of figure out the issues that you're having and why you were going to those substances, kind of what are the underlying problems that led you to become addicted to those foods and those substances. So that's one of the key things. It doesn't, the underlying problems don't become apparent for quite a long period of time. And then just realizing that food addicts are always going to be in recovery, just like no one's an alcoholic, they're always an alcoholic. Even if they are successful at abstaining for the rest of their life, it's still something that you'll have to always kind of address and deal with, and have plans for if there's a relapse, what are you going to do? What's your support system? All these different things. And of course, identifying and avoiding the food triggers is very important. And so kind of overall food addiction recommendations: having supportive friends and family around you, considering the behavioral health counseling, reading some of these books, The Craving Mind by Judson Brewer. One of the things in it that's really important is he talks about kind of mindfulness. He's really an expert in mindfulness and how to kind of ride through cravings. He has a really good analogy that I always like to bring up from the book, where he talks about how if say you're doing your best, you're eating a plant-based diet, you're avoiding the foods that are high in calorie density, sugar, salt, and fat, but you had a really stressful day, you come home from work and you're really feeling having a craving for one of these foods. He kind of talks about how you acknowledge it, and you can do things like writing in a journal and things like that to kind of write down what you're feeling, but you kind of try to ride the craving instead of just replacing it with another behavior. Like, because a lot of times we would say, okay, well, when you're craving that bad food, just eat an apple and go for a walk. It's like that's one strategy, but the studies show that he says that actually is not necessarily a good thing to do, even though that's a better, healthier choice, because it's still not getting at the underlying reason you're having the craving. So it's not treating the cause, so to speak. So he talks about riding the craving like you're riding a surfboard on a wave to the shore. So you're acknowledging how you're feeling, you're acknowledging the craving, and you're kind of just talking yourself through the craving. What happened today? Why am I feeling this right now? And you try to just ride the craving to the shore, because it will eventually pass. And if you do this enough times, that mindfulness training, and you might not always be successful. You might, don't beat yourself up if you give in to the craving, because it's a learning process. But if you change it and ride the craving and try to figure out the root cause of why you're having the craving, and then developing strategies for that, that seems to have a better effect on treating the addiction. And then the Food Junkies book, and then of course, the reason I think a whole food plant-based diet is so important is because my wife talks about this, and she wasn't up for discussing it this time, but she did give she has some sugar addiction issues, my wife does. And if you watch the class from this time last year on the class archive, she gives her story there. But all this, she told me I could say that, and then I could kind of paraphrase what she says. The reason that she recommends and follows a whole food plant-based diet when it comes to the food addiction issues is because most all the other diets will allow you to still eat some of the foods that you're addicted to. So like, Weight Watchers, for example, you have your points, and they have different processed products that still have sugar and still have fat and still have salt, and they're still processed and high in calorie density, and you have your points, and so you can still, okay, you're eating really good, and maybe you're still losing weight, but it's still allowing you to have some of the foods that you're addicted to. So it's kind of like saying, again, if you're an alcoholic, okay, well, 6 days a week you're completely good, you're not drinking any alcohol, but this diet or this plan for alcoholism allows me to drink a beer on the weekend one day, have a cheat day or something like that, and that's not going to help when you have food addiction issues. That's not going to be a plan for success. So whole food plant-based diet, if you're doing it 100% the way Charlie and I teach, and you do have these food issues, these addiction issues, then this is the only diet plan that's not going to allow you to have any of that food. And so that's one of the reasons, like my wife Angela said, this has worked for her when it comes to that. It's because she's not supposed to have any of that stuff, none of the highly processed foods or foods high in sugar, salt, and fat. So I wanted to mention that. And then I guess any questions before I move on to behavior change? Any questions about food addiction? I don't know if there's anything in the chat, Charlie.
No, let's see. They've been chatting, but about some other issues. So nothing that I would say.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about behavior change, because this is, just as important and so involved and intertwined with food addiction. So American psychologist Carl Rogers say, the curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change. So let's talk about behavior change themes. So these 5 different things are very important when it comes to behavior change. So motives. So going back to that, our why for changing. And this is, not just for, food addiction or just for diet and nutrition. It's actually also for anything. So getting better sleep at night, getting more exercise, reducing stress, doing things like yoga and meditation and all these things, and getting out and having social support and all those things that are pillars of lifestyle medicine. You can apply these for anything, any kind of behavior change. So it doesn't just have to be diet like we talk about so much in class. So having those motives, those whys for change, and then self-regulation. And it's something that's really important. I mean, even though you need all 5 of these things to be working to be successful, it's always still always comes back down to self-regulation, which means taking responsibility for ourselves, right? So kind of being the captain of your own ship. And actually there was a really good analogy on some of the behavior change and addiction stuff that was in. I don't know if you guys watched any of the Food Revolution Summit for Truth About Weight Loss. They had some people that were some of the same authors of the books that I read were actually at that online conference. And there was one, I can't remember which doc it was, but he made a good example for self-regulation. He said, instead of being a leaf that blows around in the wind, you need to be the CEO of your own body, basically. So what that means is like being a captain of your own ship. So if you have self-regulation, you're like, we always think about, oh, well, I can't make this change because my family's not supporting me, or they, someone, put this food in front of me and offer me this food, or I had too much stress, I don't have enough time, I don't have, all the different reasons we give to ourselves for not making the behavior change. That's like blowing around in the wind like a leaf. That's being really flimsy in a leaf and just blowing around, bouncing around, because we're not, because we have all these reasons for things to get us off track. But if you treat your life, yourself and your life like if your body and your health is a Fortune 500 company, you're the CEO. You call all the shots. And so yeah, you might need to utilize resources, and you're the CEO, but you have an accounting department, you have a human resources department, you have your planning team, your marketing, you have all the things you need to be a successful Fortune 500 company. You're the CEO, but you're calling the shots, and so you basically take control of yourself, basically. Even though someone offers you food, you think their feelings will be hurt if you don't eat it, you're still the one that actually puts the food in your mouth. So you have to take a bit of self-responsibility. So it's a little bit harsh, but it's a very important aspect of behavior change. And then having the resources, coming to classes, learning about what you need to do, setting up your house and your kitchen and things to be successful, planning ahead, all those things. It's important to have those resources. And then forming habits is really the big key. And after this slide, I'm going to talk about the importance of forming habits. And then environmental and social influence is all the things that we've kind of already talked about, that you want to have your environment set up to be successful. So all those things are very important to come into play here. So before we get into habits, I'm going to talk just about the 6 stages of behavior change. Some of you may be familiar with some of this terminology. So we have the pre-contemplation stage of change. And what that is you really kind of lack awareness. And most of the people that are in this class are already past this stage, but you might have friends or family that are in this stage where, they may see what you're doing, so they kind of know what you're doing, but not really. So they don't really have the awareness. But in this stage, you think that the benefits of your current behavior outweigh the cons or the risks of not making a change. So basically you like the way you're eating, you like your life the way it is, and you think that the benefits of how you feel with your current situation, your current behaviors, your lifestyle, you feel like that outweighs any risks of health problems. And so that's where your mindset tends to be when you're in the pre-contemplation stage. And then when you hit the contemplation stage, you're aware of the needed behavior change. So you may not think the risks outweigh, or the risks outweigh the benefits yet, but you need, okay, I need to lose some weight. Yeah, I'd like to get off some of these medications. Yeah, I do need to I need to exercise more. I do need to sleep better. I do need to make some of these changes, but you haven't really progressed into the pros and cons aspect yet. So you're contemplating it, but now at least you're aware of you need to make a change. And then preparation is when you're, okay, I'm going to plan to make a behavior change. You haven't really necessarily set a date or yet for sure, but it's like, okay, this is what I would do if I was to make a behavior change. And then when you're ready to hit the action stage, you're going to start the behavior change. And so now at this point, you think that the cons of the previous behavior outweigh the pros of the previous behavior. And so now you think, okay, yeah, my way I was living my life before, that's too risky. I'm at a high risk for having a heart attack or a stroke or getting cancer and things like that. I need to make the change. I'm gonna make the change. And so basically the benefits outweigh the risks at this point. You see the benefit of making the change, or the risks. You can look at it the other way too. The risks now are higher than what what you're giving up. You're getting more than what you're giving up, I guess, is the best way to say it. And then that can go on for quite some time. And then maintenance is just maintaining the behavior change and trying to think about how to prevent relapses, kind of having a kind of a reconnaissance, or having a secondary plan if you fall off the wagon, so to speak. And then what am I going to do? So you're just maintaining the behavior and trying to prevent relapses. And then if you do relapse, and then that means termination, failure to maintain the behavior change. But a lot of times, nobody's perfect. We're going to go in and out between termination, relapse, and maintenance. That's going to be an ongoing process, but hopefully we can maintain much longer than we have relapses. So those are the 6 changes. There's 6 stages of behavior change for pretty much any behavior. So let's talk about habits now. Okay, so what a habit is. So a habit refers to how you perform an action, not what the actual action is. And so a good example I like to use with this is brushing your teeth. So I don't know what you guys do, but I know, right after I get out of the shower, I take a shower at night, and right after I get out of the shower, I immediately brush my teeth. That's just kind of a habit that I've formed. And so the habit isn't necessarily brushing the teeth. It's the action of how you perform the action is what a habit is. So it's not what the action is. It's how you perform the action. So I step out of the shower, I've dried myself off, and then I brush my teeth. So so I don't even go over it here in some of these other points here, but I don't even have to think about brushing. I never just like go, oh yeah, I need to brush my teeth. I don't even have to say that in my brain. It's a reflex basically. You get out of the shower, you brush the teeth. So it's a habit that's formed because I don't have to actually think about it and doing it or plan to do it or anything like that. It's just become a habit. And interestingly, 43% of the time, our actions are habitual. So 43% of our actions throughout the day are habits. And this is going to be the goal when it comes to behavior change. If you're trying to change your diet or any of your exercise, lifestyle, the different things we talk about in these classes, this is our goal, because we want it to be a habit, not something we have to use our frontal lobe to do. We actually want it to be coming from the amygdala, the kind of the midbrain, where we just kind of do it automatically without even any thought. That's the goal. And so goals and rewards are critical for starting to build a habit, but do not help to make habits stick. So very interesting. So yeah, you need some goals and rewards to start to form a habit, to change your action, but they won't. But those goals and rewards have not been shown to help habits stick. So we have to just do it by repetition to form a habit, and we'll talk more about that. So there is a big disconnect between what we know and what we do. We all know this, right? I mean, you could go to these classes for weeks and weeks and months and know what to do and have a plan and everything else, but we don't always do it, right? There's so many reasons why we don't, and some of those reasons is we haven't actually formed a habit with some of these things. So that's a frustrating challenge. So it's important to acknowledge. So in taming a bad habit, knowledge and willpower are not effective. So it's again going into that same concept that so we have, whether it's a good habit or a bad habit, we can't use just knowledge and willpower to override that. It's not going to work. We have to form the habit instead. Next slide here. Okay, so when it comes to forming habits, our mind is not picky. Just give it repetition, rewards, and contexts. So with, again, starting a habit, we need to have those rewards and goals and things, but we just need to do it over and over and over. And our mind isn't picky. Just keep doing it over and over and over. And so eventually, even if you don't necessarily even think about it, just start forming all the habits that you want, all the actions that you want, and just keep doing them over and over and over and over. And that's why we talk about in the classes all the time about, when you are learning a new language, when you're learning to play tennis, when you're learning to play the piano, what do? You just do it over and over and over, right? Just repetition, repetition, repetition. All the professional athletes and stuff that do their skills, they just do it over and over and over and over. It just becomes second nature. So habits form when we act repeatedly without planning or deliberating. And so that's a good example again with brushing the teeth. So without even planning or thinking about it, you just do it. So that's how habits form. And so habits come from repetition. Behavior begets behavior. So if you just keep doing it, it'll start happening with more and more ease. And so a way you can apply this is you have the next bit is environment, environment, environment. And the reason it says that is because you want to set up the environment, or in your home especially, that the right choice or the healthy choice is the easy choice. So you don't want to put foods that are tempting in your environment, because you don't want it to be in your environment. You want the good choice to be the healthy choice, to be the easy choice. So you don't have to even think about it. It's just, okay, I'm hungry, I'm going to reach for this. Whereas if you have chips there, or cookies or something like that, you're gonna reach for it. And if you're gonna end up with eating something like that, you would have to drive to the store to get it, or you'd have to, ask a family member for a key to the pantry that they might keep it in if you have other family members that are eating the bad stuff. If you haven't been able to negotiate getting that stuff out of your environment, then you have to have a way to cause disruption. And that's the next slide. So building the right environment is key. Make the right choice the easy choice, and make the wrong choice more difficult, the more difficult choice, the disruption. And so if you had to, like you're having a craving at, 10 o'clock at night or something, there's nothing in your environment, you would have to drive to a fast food restaurant, or you have to go to the store to get it. And so that fact, you have to do another behavior to get the food that you want, that's the disruption. Now you have to actually think about it. You actually have to, it's not part of the habit anymore. It's going to be, oh, I'm going to have to drive to the store. And then maybe in that time frame that you're contemplating driving to the store, you might be able to do the craving mind trick, where you ride the craving to the shore, and you might be able to write in your journal instead, well, why am I feeling this craving? Why am I wanting to go to the store to get that? And so that's one trick, one technique. And then there's even things like my wife, this is another thing my wife Angela has said that helped her throughout the process, and still does sometimes, is even some of the whole food plant-based cookbooks, they'll have recipes for cookies and different desserts and things like that. And they're a little high in calorie density, and some of them do still have like date sugar and some things in it. So they're still gonna potentially flood the brain with some dopamine, but it is a little bit better it's a little bit healthier choice than getting a Snickers bar or a pint of ice cream or something, because it's going to be a healthier version, and it's not going to maybe stimulate the dopamine in your brain quite as much as the Snickers bar or the ice cream, but it's going to be something you're going to have to make it yourself, and that's going to be a disruption technique as well. But even if you were to give into that once in a while, and sometimes that will happen, at least that's a step in the right direction, because it's not like, it's kind of like, I guess you could say it's like methadone for a heroin addict, right? So instead of going out and shooting up the heroin, you took some methadone, and methadone at least will help with the craving and help you from having withdrawals and stuff like that. But it's not, it's not the end result that you want to do for the rest of your life, but it's going to be a good stepping stone. And so that's another example of having kind of a strategy in place where you're using disruption to help with the craving. But ultimately, if you can get to where you like, okay, I'm having this craving, and I'm just going to ride the wave, ride the crave to the shore, that ultimately is where you want to get to. But I think that's important to go over that. And then, yeah, to finally, another book, Good Habits, Bad Habits by Wendy Wood. If we persist to do something, even though we don't value the reward as much, or the reward is no longer available, then it's a habit. So again, you need that reward a little bit to have goals and rewards to start the action that you want to get to form a habit. But then when you've achieved a habit, an action is now a habit when you do something even when you don't value the reward as much, because you're like, oh, I'm getting healthy and I'm achieving my goals or whatever, but you don't necessarily are thinking about it every time you make that decision to do that action, exercise or get the better sleep or choose that food over this food. You're not getting the immediate reward like you were early on, but you're just doing it anyway, and you're doing it over and over, then you've achieved a habit. And so habits are very important. All right, so questions, that's all I had for behavior change and habits. If we have some questions, we can do that. Otherwise, I'll show you the video I was telling you about on the willpower instinct. But do we have any questions? It's a lot of information there in a short period of time. Let's stop sharing.
Yes, Trouty.
You're muted.
I have a question. Some people have more willpower than others. How do the ones that don't have enough willpower, how do they fare with it? Does it work the same way with these books?
Well, so yeah, that's a perfect question for this video I'm going to show you about willpower, willpower instinct. But willpower has not been shown to be effective for behavior change or for food addiction. So that's why we got to form those habits and not have to depend on willpower.
Okay. My
All
mom
right.
used to It's just willpower.
Yeah,
Uh,
I mean, a normal food eater can use willpower, like I showed in that very first, early on in the slides. You know, that some people that can do that, they can just go, okay, I'm just gonna eat a little bit less and lose the few pounds I gained. But I would say that's a very big minority of people, especially in American food culture. That's pretty rare to have that ability.
Edward. Unmute.
Whoops. So I don't ever want to work out or brush my teeth or anything, but the way I've set it up is that I do it anyway, not out of willpower, but because if I don't, I'll feel like a jerk. What is that?
Well, it sounds like you're still thinking about it, so maybe it's not as good of a habit or as much of a habit as you'd like it to be. You know, just hopefully you can get to where you just do it without even thinking about it. But
Okay, so
it takes practice, repetition, and practice.
okay, thank you.
How about you, Joan?
I was thinking about the recipes, like for the cookies in these cookbooks, or you know, even a family meal. Sometimes you want to feel a part of other people. And so to make those cookies, it's something you could share with other people that aren't on the rigid plant-based diet.
Right. And one, that's a great point. And one of the, I remember one of the experiences my wife had when she was at her last job she was at, where she, you know, because she was so used to eating whole food plant-based, that when she would eat the plant-based cookies she would make, to her, they taste so decadent and so sweet. But then when she shared them at her work, where her coworkers were eating, you know, there's dishes of M&M peanuts and chocolate bars and all kinds of donuts and crap all over. They took a bite of the cookie and they're like, oh, this isn't very sweet. Oh, you think these are sweet? And so, you know, so it just kind of, I mean, they still had that connection. She was able to share those with them. And so they still had that experience. But it shows you how, wow, I've really come a long way. If this tastes like something decadent to me, but they think it tastes like hardly anything, because the taste buds, your taste change. I think a lot of it is to you know, hopefully we can slowly change our own culture in within our families and friends, that, you know, everything doesn't have to revolve around food. I mean, we could bring some different foods, or you know, we can always do celebrations, you know, without food as being the center, because a lot of it is, you know, think about your memories as a childhood. You know, the food goes with it a lot of times, but really, for the most of us, it's the time we spend with the family that's the most important, not the actual food we're eating. So, but it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of, if you can try to slowly shift the culture to healthier foods choices for when we get together, that would be helpful. But that's a big challenge for sure.
Okay, maybe you could share the video with us, and then we'll see if there are any more questions.
That. Yeah. Here to videos. Oh, sorry.
I'm delighted to welcome to the Googleplex Kelly McGonigal, a health psychologist.
Go to 3 minutes. So yeah, she's a health psychologist at Stanford, and she was teaching a class on willpower, the willpower instinct.
To eat and what to do. Okay, well, these are all great examples of willpower challenges. And I want to just start with a little definition, my definition of willpower or willpower challenge. And I define a willpower challenge as something that is basically a competition between two parts of yourself. Neuroscientists are famous for saying that even though we have one brain, we actually have two minds, and we are completely different people depending on which mind is active or which systems of the brain are more active. And so a willpower challenge is anything where those two versions of yourself have competing goals. So for example, there may be part of you that really wants to eat a candy bar for your snack, And then there's a part of you that actually has some longer term goals. You're thinking health, you're thinking weight loss, you're thinking bikini season, whatever. And maybe the banana seems like the better snack. And again, both of these choices you might be drawn to by different parts of your mind or two different versions of yourself. And one of the things that has really influenced my work with willpower is thinking about it in terms of what's going on in the brain. And we're going to talk about that a little bit today. The fact that you could be the very same person, but depending on your mindset, depending on your energy, depending on your stress levels, your brain is going to meet this willpower challenge in a different way. And you're going to end up making, one choice today and one choice tomorrow. As mentioned, this book is based on a class that I teach at Stanford called The Science of Willpower. Those are our actual students. I'm not sure what I said that was funny, but those are actual Science of Willpower students. And I created this course because I was going around trying to teach people how to be more productive, how to improve their health. And everywhere I went, people said, oh, we know we're supposed to do that stuff already. We just don't want to do it. And there was this really interesting fundamental gap between what people wanted and what they thought they wanted. That is, people were very identified, you could say, with this version of the self. People felt like deep down, they were the person who wanted the candy bar. And this other person who wanted the banana, like, who is that? That's not really me. And I realized that people didn't just need to know what is the right thing to do or the healthy thing to do or tips for stress management and productivity. They needed to feel like this person. And they needed to know how to be that person as the default, rather than walking around always feeling like they had to resist this core self that only wants immediate gratification or never wants to do anything difficult. Okay, so that's how the class came about. There we go. Okay, great. So I thought today, since this is a class based on science, that I would share with you 5 of my favorite experiments from the class and from the book. And I chose experiments that I like because they use tiny interventions, really, really small interventions to shape people's behavior. And they have very large outcomes. And I think this is the kind of thing many of us are looking for. One small change we can make, whether it's a change in how we think or change in the way that we're approaching a willpower challenge, that can have huge payoffs down the road, making it easier to do what it is we really deep down want, even when it's sometimes difficult or part of us doesn't want. Okay, so let's start with the first experiment. How many of you guys sometimes feel like this guy? I know at least one of you only had 3 hours of sleep last night. Yeah. So it turns out that when you're this version of yourself, every willpower challenge is more difficult. And the first intervention that I want to tell you about is actually a sleep intervention. The main intervention was trying to help people sleep more or sleep better. And it was people who had a very serious willpower challenge. These are people who were recovering from addiction to drugs, and they were in a substance abuse recovery program. And half of the people in the standard care were assigned to take a mindfulness meditation training that was designed to help them improve their sleep or sleep more. And so the first thing I want you to take a look at on this graph, this is minutes of sleep per night. And you're going to think this is insanely optimistic, I know, but everyone's starting around 7 hours. And we're going to improve on 7 hours. And that probably seems an impossible dream. Okay, so everyone in the group was starting around 7 hours. And what the researchers found was that just doing a little bit of meditation every day, breath-focused meditation, increased sleep time to just over 8 hours a day. And the control group had a little bit of deterioration to slightly less than 7 hours of sleep a night. You know, that's not the interesting finding. I mean, it is nice to know that if you meditate for a few minutes a day, you will sleep better and get more sleep. But what's interesting is how that change in sleep time then made these recovering addicts impervious to relapse. They were stronger against relapse. And this is a very high correlation, 0.70. The increase in sleep time predicted resistance to relapse, a correlation of 0.70. Getting 1 more hour of sleep a night suddenly made it a lot easier for these recovering addicts to resist the temptation of falling off the wagon. And interestingly, the number, I never know, it's going to bounce off the screen, right? I should point at the screen. You guys are tech experts. The number of minutes per day that people meditated also predicted resistance to relapse. So there were really 2 things going on in this intervention. There was getting more sleep, and there was also something about the actual practice time. And it wasn't a lot, but it was something like 10 minutes a day, 15 minutes a day. And both of these things, sleep and meditation, we're giving people more willpower for one of the biggest willpower challenges. So I want us to think together a little bit about why those two small interventions, an hour more sleep or 10 minutes of meditation a day, might actually give us more willpower for any willpower challenge. What you're looking at here is an image from an fMRI study of what happens to the brain when you're a little bit sleep deprived. And most studies use less than 6 hours of sleep a night as sleep deprived, which may seem normal to you, but for most of us, that's actually functioning far suboptimal. What you're looking at here is a composite of a lot of different people's brains, some who are sleep deprived and some who are not. And we're going to slice the brain. So imagine me standing this way, and we're going to have one of those like meat slicers, and we're going to slice down the head and just start taking sections off and look down the middle. And so where you see these yellow spots, that's the front of the brain right about here or right about here. That was my brain pointing that way. And yellow means that this area of the brain is underactivated when you have less than 6 hours of sleep a night, or this area of the brain is unable to do its job as efficiently. And the red areas are areas that are more activated, sort of midbrain regions that are associated with basic impulses and instincts. So when you're getting less than 6 hours of sleep a night, your brain is actually unable to recruit the systems of the brain that you need to be that better version of yourself. This area of the brain, I love this image because it's like, here's where the balance is weighed. Do I want the weight loss or do I want the chocolate bar? And this area of the brain right here is basically keeping track of your goals. And it's sort of a hard job. It's heavy lifting it needs to do is to remember long-term goals, core values. And when it is unable to do that, when it's underfueled or when it's underactive, your brain thinks all you really want is the chocolate bar, or to procrastinate, or to follow that link through, or to not bother doing your yoga exercises. And so in some key way, the ability to remember who you are and what your big goals are is dependent on the ability of this area of the brain to use energy well. And sleep deprivation is one of the main things that can get in the way of that. And I think that's one of the reasons why this small sleep intervention ended up helping people resist relapse to drug addiction, because they now had brains that were better fueled to remember their goals to stay clean and sober. And it's not just sleep that impacts the physiology of your brain, how well your brain uses energy. There are a couple of other things that seem to really strengthen the ability of the brain's frontal regions to do what they're supposed to do, to help you control impulses and find your motivation. And here are the 4 things from the research that seem to do it, to make your brain a kind of willpower machine. One is sleep, as I mentioned, and hopefully there's going to be one thing on this list that you're not currently doing that you're willing to do, because you don't have to do all 4. So getting a little bit more sleep really makes the prefrontal cortex better able to regulate those systems of the brain that direct you towards temptation and immediate gratification. And meditation also. And both meditation and physical exercise have been shown not only to make your brain more efficient at using these self-control systems, but they actually make these systems bigger and better connected to the regions that they are supposed to be controlling. And again, it can be a very quick time course to see these benefits. People who meditate maybe 10 minutes a day, after a couple of months, their brains look different. These regions are bigger and better connected. People who work out on a regular basis who used to be sedentary, again, studies show that in as little as a couple of months of regular workouts, their prefrontal cortices are bigger and denser and better connected. And so these are 2 of the things you can do that actually train the physiology of your willpower. And the last thing that the research suggests is what you eat has a very big influence on whether or not your brain is able to be this better version of yourself. There's something about having big spikes in blood sugar levels and then big drops in blood sugar levels that really screws up how the brain uses energy. And you need your brain to be like an energy efficient machine if you're going to be walking around the world in that kind of better you mindset rather than that kind of basic impulse you. And so research shows that shifting to eating a more plant-based diet actually changes the way the brain functions and has a lot to do with what's going on with your blood sugar levels. And so these are all things that we sometimes think of as requiring willpower, right? We think, okay, I have to sit down and force myself to meditate. I have to work out. I have to say no to the donut and eat something, that has fiber in it for breakfast. But we rarely think about the fact that actually not doing these things may be part of what makes it so difficult to begin. And there's a kind of a curve where when we first start, it feels like we're using willpower, but everything on this list that takes a little bit of willpower to begin with ends up giving you back far more willpower than they take. And not just for these challenges. It's not just that exercising makes it easier to exercise. Studies show that exercising makes it easier to eat right, to not spend too much money, to stop procrastinating, to pay better attention. All of these things have a kind of global training effect on what you could think of as your willpower muscle. Was there a question up front or a comment? So the question is, why does it say low glycemic and plant-based? There's actually more evidence that a vegan diet does this better than a diet that is low glycemic and includes animal products, but I'm not sure that that's entirely realistic for everyone. So I think you can kind of pick your which way you're willing to go with that. Both low glycemic and plant-based help. But if you look at just the physiology of it, there's more evidence for the plant-based diet. Okay, so let me go on to the next experiment. So the first experiment was just get some more sleep. Second experiment, I want you to think about a recent setback you had or a kind of a willpower failure. Maybe it was not eating the healthy thing at lunch. Maybe it was not doing your exercise in the morning. Maybe it was spending all morning long following links that had nothing to do with your project. Okay, so I want you to think of a recent time when you had some kind of willpower failure. Does anyone need to borrow one of mine? Yeah, you guys got one? Okay. So my question for you is, do you think that feeling bad about that, presumably feeling maybe a little bit of regret, a little bit of guilt about it, a little bit of self-criticism about that, does that help us improve next time? Can that be a real source of future willpower? Raise your hand if you think that feeling bad can actually be a real source of willpower to improve next time. Hands up. And how many of you think that that feeling bad is actually going to be a further drain on willpower? Yeah, great. Maybe some of you have read that chapter in the book. So I want to talk now about some of the research that tends to surprise people the most. When I first started teaching this class, this was the research people argued with. Like literally, I couldn't get them to be quiet in the classroom because they were so convinced this could possibly be true. This is a study looking at whether it's better to let yourself off the hook for your mistakes in terms of preventing future willpower collapses. And so this particular study I'm going to talk about in a little more detail brought in people who were trying to manage their weight and eat healthy. And they gave them an immediate willpower failure. They showed up for the study and they were forced to eat a donut. And they even had to choose the flavor of donut they were going to eat, so they would feel really complicit in this willpower failure. And they had to drink a whole glass of water too, so they'd feel a little bit uncomfortably full. Okay, so we have everyone, dieters here, having now a willpower failure. They just ate this donut. And the next part of the study is a taste test, where they're given a lot of different types of candy, and they're said, you know, we want you to evaluate all of these candies, so please just eat as much as you need to, as much as you want, so that you can evaluate these candies. And of course, these candies were all pre-weighed, so that experimenters could find out exactly how much candy the dieters ate after they had blown their diet with a donut. And in this particular study, the researchers had a hypothesis. They thought that the guilt that dieters experience when they fall off their diet actually really undermines future self-control. And so they wanted to create an intervention that would basically get rid of the guilt and shame that people feel when they make a mistake. And so in this study, half of the dieters were randomly assigned to receive a special letting themselves off the hook message. So between the donut eating and the taste test, an experimenter came in and said something very simple. They said, by the way, we've realized now that some people in this experiment feel guilty after eating the donut. Okay? So there was an opportunity for people to recognize they might be feeling guilty. Second part of the message, we want you to remember that actually everyone indulges sometimes, and we ask you to do it. So there's a kind of putting it in a broader perspective. And the last part of the message was a simple plea. Please don't be too hard on yourself about it. Okay, so very simple. You might be feeling guilty. Remember, everyone does it. Don't be hard on yourself about it. And then they went on to the taste test. And what the researchers found was that the women who had been given the self-forgiveness message ate less than half as much candy as women who had not been told, don't worry about it, it's not a big deal. which is exactly the opposite of what most people think. Most people think you make a mistake, you have a willpower failure, and you start saying nice things to yourself about it, that this could only lead to disaster. It would lead to licensing even more indulgence. And yet that's exactly the opposite of what was found in this study, and not just this study, but in a lot of different studies now. This is one of the sort of the strongest pieces of theory we have in willpower research right now. That is, the harder you are on yourself when you have a willpower failure, the more likely you are to have the same failure again, and the bigger it's going to be when you do. For example, one study took a look at problem drinkers and had them keep track of how much they were drinking and how bad they felt the morning after. What they found is that the people who were the most self-critical and felt the most ashamed or guilty about drinking the night before wanted to drink more immediately when they woke up, and also drank more that night and the next. There was something about the self-critical nature, the shame and the guilt, that was driving people back to the very thing they felt bad about. Same has been shown for addictions, including quitting smoking. You know, you have that first relapse, and the more you beat yourself up about it, the more you now need to be comforted with something, probably the very thing that you're feeling bad about, because that's probably why you do it in the first place. Same has been shown for gambling. The more people feel guilty and self-critical about losing money, the more likely they are to borrow money and try to win it back and end up losing more. And even for procrastination, so you may not have any kind of addictions, but even for procrastination, research shows that the harder someone is on themselves for putting something off, the longer they procrastinate the next time. And all of this has to do with the basic fact that when we are feeling stressed out and guilty and ashamed, that is a state that puts us into the version of ourselves, the mindset, that is much more susceptible to immediate gratification, temptation, and anxiety. It's basically the biological opposite of what needs to be happening in your brain and body to remember your long-term goals and to be that other version of yourself, what we would call the willpower version of yourself. And as soon as you start piling on the guilt and the shame, your brain switches into that other mode in which now everything's going to be more tempting, including procrastinating or including smoking or drinking. So I just wanted to give you a sense of what it would be like to give yourself a self-compassion message. Again, I said this was a tiny intervention, this donut study, and this is basically all it was. And there are a number of programs now that are teaching people how to write these messages for themselves and to literally have them scripted for the moment they fail, for the moment that they procrastinated and they're late again, or for the moment they had that cigarette when they hadn't smoked in a week, and to be able to whip this message out as a way of not falling down that hole that we often fall into. So the 3 steps of this message is, the first is mindfulness of what you're thinking and feeling. Noticing that you're feeling guilty, or noticing that you're feeling self-doubt or self-critical, maybe angry at yourself, and actually allow yourself to see those feelings. Because a big reason that people go from feeling guilty to giving in again is that they just want to get rid of that feeling. It's so kind of overwhelming, and they want to distract themselves from it with something that is going to get them into further trouble. And then the second step is this common humanity. One of the reasons that it is hard to find our motivation and our willpower is we start to feel like there's something uniquely broken with us. There's something about who we are that is wrong and weak. And that mindset makes it very difficult to tap back into your motivation or your strength. And so this message of common humanity is basically saying to yourself, you know what? This is part of the process of change. This is how things get done. Sometimes we procrastinate. Sometimes we fall off the wagon. Everyone is imperfect. And to recognize that this is not saying anything about who you are. It's saying something about the process. And what matters is how you respond afterward, not the fact that it happened at all. And then this last step is encouragement over criticism. And if you were to think about someone you were mentoring, you know, some of you probably have mentees here or interns, or you think about a child that you care about or a dear friend, what would you say to them when they had a setback? And to say that to yourself, it might be reminding yourself of your goal. It might be reminding yourself of the big picture rather than the sort of the micro picture in which you feel like a failure. And to do that rather than the voices we often have in our head that are saying things like, why did you do that again? You're so stupid. You're never going to change. And to actually start to talk to yourself a little bit in the second person as if you were a good friend. And research shows that this particular approach, learning how to talk to yourself in this way, is more effective, for example, at quitting smoking than nicotine replacement therapy. That's how powerful being able to respond to setbacks with self-compassion can be. I want you to
Hey, watch the rest of that anytime. Isn't that really interesting, isn't it? Like,
Yeah.
From my science mind, it's like, okay, I want to stay in the frontal lobe of my brain where I can have all my goals and everything I learned in class and all these things. We want to live there because the midbrain, the amygdala, that's where when we're having stress, when we're sleep deprived, when we're kind of just running on emotion, that's where we're going to be craving those foods that aren't going to be healthy or those behaviors that aren't going to be healthy because we just want to be immediately comforted with the substance, basically. And so shows you how important all of this relationship is with the stuff that Charlie's going to talk about the next couple of weeks and all of that. So any thoughts, comments on that?
I thought it was super interesting. I used to meditate and I don't now because I'm so busy, but I'm wondering, does it matter when in the day? No, okay, I'm going back
No.
to it. Yeah.
However long you can do it or whenever, yeah.
Yeah. That's great.
And it's not very much meditation. It's not like 45 minutes or an hour at
No.
a time.
Right.
10 to 15 minutes is pretty doable,
Yeah.
except for some of us who have problems with a minute or two, but you still can train yourself up if you're having problems. Just set your goals and just keep at it. Any other thoughts from anyone?
Charlie, can I say something?
Sure.
My situation is very different. If I'm not going to be tough with myself, I will do it over and over again. So this way of saying, oh, it's just a process, it won't do any good because I need to be tough with myself in order to succeed. Otherwise, it won't work. I have that problem with the candy bar. When I go to the airport and I'm there, there's that little gift shop and they have that candy bar that I like. So I think that's a big treat then. But now that I hear that, I got to be tough with myself. There's no falling off anymore. That's just off and that's it. I got to be tough with myself. Otherwise, I go over and over doing the same problem and saying, oh, I can get away with it. No, it's not going to be that way. My thinking is a little different than you Americans are.
Yeah, so we do have individual differences, but if you notice from the study, they took random groups of people and they tested them and they found this to be the case for the majority of people. That they're going to be drinking more, they're going to be smoking more, they're going to be eating more if they're hard on themselves. And so maybe you're one of those people that doesn't fall into that group.
Although if you're saying basically what you just described to us just now, that was all from your frontal lobe of your brain. That was all from, oh, I need to be hard on myself. I'm thinking about, oh, I can't eat that candy bar because that's not going to be good for me. That's all your frontal lobe. That's all your reasoning, your goals and everything else. But when if you're just feeling stressed and in a hurry and you just want to reach for that candy bar and you eat the candy bar, then you're you made the mistake. I guess the point is, after you've already done the behavior that you didn't want to do, that's when you want to be forgiving of yourself. Don't beat yourself up after the fact. But if you're thinking about it beforehand, that's what the idea is you're using your frontal lobe to say, well, I'm going to be going to the airport. I can't do that. I can't be tempted by that. You're using your reason.
It doesn't work for me. When I'm in a hurry, I don't have time to think about it and I go past it. It's not and if I'm stressed out, I want to go home and just leave everything alone. So yeah. Anyway, I think a little different about it. And I'm a control freak. I gotta manage that. And if I'm not tough, I'm not gonna work that way.
Okay, Lisa, do you have anything you want to add about the book club or anything?
Yeah, sure. Well, first on what we were just discussing, I do know that everybody has their own way of doing the plant-based diet or just making changes to your lifestyle in general. So if you ever feel like you need more one-on-one help for your own situation, I'm happy to meet with you. I just met with a new participant last night, and it's been great so far. So I'll put my email in the chat in a second. As far as the book club, we are starting our second book, Salt, Sugar, Fat. So this goes along with what we're talking about tonight. And we'll be meeting at the end of March. So if you're interested in that, you can also email me. And our Facebook group is still up and running, so a lot of great support there too. I think that's really important when you're making these changes as well. I know a lot of you live with family members or kids who don't eat the same way that you do, and that's tough, especially if you're cooking for them. So I think it's really valuable to find support through our community, through me, whatever you need to do to feel like you can make these changes. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
have-
Wait a second, Trouty. Kate has her hand up for a while, so let her go first.
Oh, I just wanted to say that I really appreciate you guys talking about this and showing that video too, because as someone who struggles with food addiction, this makes me feel less crazy. I've been trying to explain to my friends and my family for years that this is a real addiction, and that when I'm trying to improve my health, it's something that I have to actively think about all day, every day, and that all of their support makes a huge difference. And, you know, they think I'm just being dramatic, but when I first made the change to whole food plant-based, I did it all or nothing. I got rid of all of the junk in my house. We bought all fresh foods, whole new pantry, whole new fridge. And I had huge results right away. Just within a week, my energy was back. Since, you know, my entire life, I'd never felt that way before. I lost 30 pounds in a month. And I remember thinking, I will never, ever go back to eating the way I was because this makes me feel so good. But then at the beginning of February, the very first day of February, I had what was supposed to be one cheat day, and it turned into literally the entire month of a complete relapse, just eating out every day and not even trying to eat whole food plant-based. Even though I was still going grocery shopping for the whole food plant-based stuff, it's just sitting in my fridge unused. So, you know, it's really frustrating to try and explain this to people and explain the internal struggle, because, you know, even when I'm doing really well, I'll see a cookie or cake in the break room and I'll think, I don't want that, and I walk away. And then I continue thinking about it and I start thinking, okay, well, maybe just one will be okay. And then I tell myself, no, I don't want that. We really don't want that. We don't need it. And before you know it, I'm in the break room eating that cookie or two or three. And it's just a constant struggle. So thank you for covering this, because I think it's something that not a lot of people really take seriously or really understand, and it needs more attention.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, that was great. Thanks for sharing that. It's just to show you, it's just, but no one would, if you were an alcoholic, nobody would say, you know, you wouldn't have said, oh yeah, go ahead and have a cheat day and drink alcohol, because you'll fall off the wagon hard, right? But with food, it's normalized. Eating this way is, eating a standard American diet is normalized. The foods are so addicting, and more so for some people. So
I've had several people tell me I need to have a cheat day every once in a while. I have to have it because it's bad for my mental health if I don't. And for me, it's hard to explain that, no, it's that cheat day that's really bad for my mental health.
Mhm. That's right.
Just shows how long long ways we have to go. And so, but I think it's, hopefully you feel comforted by the fact that, you know, there are psychiatrists and lots of mental health professionals and studies and imaging studies and all kinds of things that support what you're experiencing, and that you know, just you know, basically acknowledges it, and that you just have to be treated the same. You have to treat food addiction the same as if you were an alcoholic or a heroin addict or anything else, and just
Can't
get on
have it.
a plant-based diet, get counseling if you need it, get all the support you need, everything you would do to support someone with a substance abuse addiction. So, so kudos to you for sharing that with everybody.
Okay, Trotty.
I have one quick question. Where can I get that book? And how much is it?
Which one?
The salt, sugar, and whatever.
Salt,
Yeah.
sugar, fat. Yeah, so it's, you can probably get it at the library. I mean, Lisa might know, but I mean, I know you don't do Amazon, so 'cause you can get any book on Amazon, but
The library will have it?
they might. I guess I don't know for sure. It's an older book. I think it was written in 2012.
I think they'll have it.
Okay. By whom was that?
Michael
Oh,
Moss.
Moss.
Yeah.
What is it?
Michael Moss, MOSS.
Yeah.
Okay. So next week, we're going to be talking about mind and health. It's going to be kind of a continuation of this to a degree, dealing with some slightly different issues. This has been a really good session. Thank you, Scott. The videos were great, and the discussion, and we had, I don't know, 48 people. They stayed to what, 47 till the end. So it was, you know, obviously an important topic, and we may hit that again sooner rather than later.
Great, thanks for coming, everybody.
Okay.
Oh,
Any,
go ahead.
any last comments from anyone? Good?
My first time joining, I thought it was great. Thanks, Scott.
Oh, yeah. Great.
David,
Yes.
glad to have you for a first time.
Oh,
Keep coming.
I'll give it a try, definitely. Thank you.
Okay. All right, everybody. It's been great fun. And Scott, do you have anything else to add at the end here? Are we good?
I think we're good. Just have a lot. You have a couple weeks. Last year you did 2 classes for mind and health, so you can have as much time as you want. And then,
Okay.
and then food and mood after that. So for David, the new one, if you're signed up for the class website or the newsletter and you have seen the Live Lifestyle Medicine website, to catch up with us, you could always go back to the class archives and and watch from the beginning.
That's a great idea.
So you can go to the homepage on the livelifestylemedicine.com and scroll down, and you'll see a website tutorial there. And you can just click on that and watch it. It's about 15 minutes. I give a tour of what's all available on the website and where to find everything. And then you could start watching the class archives that we started in January.
Oh, very good. Yep, I'll give it a try.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
And for the new people, I just want to give a plug again. Lisa Chick, the third-year medical student who put her information in the chat room. We'll leave it open here for another minute. She has really helped a number of people. She's been doing this for, I don't know, almost a couple of years now. And it's not only valuable for her, it's valuable for, I have comments. I had comment this afternoon from one of the members who his blood pressure dropped. It really helped him. He seemed to be stuck. And it was from a simple question that she asked him about, well, would you like to try something? And then discussed with him what he might like to try. And this was on his own, but he said that she listens and she's wonderful. And give it some thought. There's no charge. Okay,
Great. Thank you.
you're welcome. Good
Thank you,
night,
guys.
everybody. Till the next time.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Good night.
Good
Thank
night.
you.
Thanks, Scott.